Hi, fellow geochemists and geochemistry enthusiasts. Welcome to Geochemist Tea, the only podcast for people who love geochemistry with a side of tea. Our mission isn't to aspire and to shed light on the topics not fancy enough to talk about at a conference, but important to delve into. I'm your host, Sam Schur, and this week we're talking with Juan Carlos Ordonez about geochemical modeling for ore body knowledge and exploration targeting. Juan Carlos is the Senior Manager for Exploration and Resource Geochemistry at Kinross Gold. Juan Carlos, welcome to Geochemistry.
Thank you, Sam, for having me on your show.
So if you guys haven't met Juan Carlos, in addition to his behind-the-scenes work in-house, he also has released a number of papers the past 5 years where he has applied advanced data analytics to integrate geochemistry with geological, mineralogical, and geometallurgical data. Talking about topics of interest for the show, Juan Carlos needed a few months to come up with the plan, and ultimately he landed talking about using multi-element geochemistry not only for exploration, but as a fundamental tool to map 3D geological attributes of ore bodies to support resource estimation, delineation of geometallurgical variability, and mapping environmental risks. So Juan Carlos, can you expand on this a bit for our audience?
Yes, thank you for asking. So I've been in the industry I've been interpreting geochemical data for around 21 years and in the industry for 15 years. So my view is that we are in the applied geochemistry community is being so extremely focused on the application of geochemistry to exploration. And there is nothing wrong with that, but I think as an applied science, we are not doing a good service to actually include the diversity of applications of geochemistry in the mining industry that goes beyond exploration. For instance, applications in solving problems in operations, for geometallurgy, throughputs, recoveries, modeling deleterious minerals that can cause problems in your processing. Modeling using geochemistry to model those environmental domains for waste management. So geochemistry is, as an applied science in the mining industry, is a much richer science than just the exploration part of it. And I think focusing geochemistry in the mining industry just on the exploration side is really limiting the actual broad of applications that geochemical data and geochemical analysis can bring to the mining industry.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I'm really glad that we're going to have this chat today because I can't wait for people to hear more about this. So at this point, we've barely touched on your career, and I know that it's interesting. So can you take our listeners back to how you started out, which I believe was mapping, and what got you interested in geochemistry?
Yes, so geochemistry in my case was kind of an accident because it was, for me, geochemistry was more like a tool. So I'm a geoscientist. I was born in Colombia and I did my bachelor degree in Colombia in geoscience, in geology. And then I ventured to Japan and Canada to do my master's and PhD. So geochemistry was always a tool to kind of my scientific education. So I did a lot of work on, mapping, from a volcanological structural geology perspective, Archean greenstone belts, Cordilleran settings for intrusive related deposits, for volcanogenic hosted deposits, orogenic gold. So geochemistry for me was more, it was part of a tool, like to really better understand the field geology using geochemistry. There's no point to, break your head trying to what kind of rock is this after 3 or 4 episodes of metasomatism when you have geochemistry and can really tell you what the lithology is. You focus more your field geology time to looking at things that geochemistry don't see, like textural analysis, lithophases, fabrics in in the case of structural geology. So geochemistry for me was this tool in addition to the field geology that makes us, geologists. And then when I came to the mining industry, after I worked a few years with the government for Ontario Geological Survey, Geological Survey of Canada, doing maps as a Precambrian geoscientist, and geochemistry was there as well to help interpreting, building these big regional scale geological models and some kind of a function of the government is providing the geological knowledge so that companies invest in exploration, for example. So geochemistry was always there. Then I decided to venture into the mining industry. So I've been looking at geochemistry for 15 years. So when I came to the mining industry, actually I came as an structural geologist. But to me, the shock was we have all these geochemical data sets, hundreds of thousands of geochemistry data points, and people are not using it. And since I had the knowledge, I started pushing into that direction. Pushing groups and companies that I have worked for into really leveraging the value of these multi-element geochemical data sets. So since then, I've been a very strong advocate of using multi-element geochemistry in the mining industry for different applications, not just exploration, but we are talking about today as well. I have put a series of papers for geometallurgy. I have collaborated a lot with the University of Toronto, where I'm an adjunct faculty, also an adjunct faculty with the University of Laurentian. So I kind of have managed to get funding from the companies I work for to explore more applications of geochemistry in the mining industry. So with the University of Toronto, we're doing a series of innovations where geochemistry is part of it to support, for example, mining operations for throughput recovery models, also using digital imagery to inform geochemistry texturally. So that's kind of the background of how I came into geochemistry. I think the big shock and kind of motivated me a lot to become kind of a public speaker on geochemistry was seeing all these geochemical data sets that are barely used in the mining industry. People are collecting it appropriately or not. People are not using these geochemical data sets. So I saw the opportunity and I have been using geochemistry to support not just exploration, but also operations and mine closure projects in the mining industry for the last 15 years.
So interesting. I always love talking about your story with you. And I'm glad now that people get to hear it. So just to finish out this, do you have any tips or advice to give our listeners that want to break into geochemistry, especially in mineral exploration or on the mining side? Because I think particularly in the ore body knowledge field, it's getting quite large of an opportunity for people.
Yes, I think in today's world, there is no scarcity of geochemical data. So anyone that wants to work with these data sets, they are at your fingertips if you're working for a mining company. Whether it's a small data set, in today's world, a small data set is 3,000, 4,000 samples. When we were doing in school years ago, maybe 500 samples was a lot. But nowadays there is no scarcity, whether it is a proper lab digested geochemistry or is instrumental, like portable instrument geochemistry. So there is no scarcity. So the limitation, I think, is if people are really serious into jumping into becoming competent geochemists, you need to spend and invest time in the fundamentals of applied geochemistry. And that's and when I talk about applied geochemistry in the mining industry, there is two components in my view, and is the component that relates to Earth's processes, and is how this periodic table work in geological environments, how these different elements behave during weathering, oxidation, partial melting, hydrothermal alteration, metasomatism, deformation, so that you can actually put geochemical literacy into your modeling, and that's very important. But there is also in the mining industry this other side of geochemistry that is not talked a lot, and is that geochemistry is also an engineered product. Because when you are, for example, supporting a recovery model, when you're supporting throughput, these are engineered products. So there are other factors to consider in addition to understanding geochemistry from a purely natural perspective and the geological environment. There is also understanding geochemistry in this kind of as an engineered product and how it can help these operations. So spend a lot of time practicing with the data sets that you have at your fingertips, but understand the fundamentals of applied geochemistry and understand how a real mining operation works so that you can better leverage these data sets and build your skills from there.
I think that's a really good point, and I hope that everybody takes that to heart. There's so many opportunities out there. You just have to also just not think so linearly about it, that you have to get into exploration first, and then you have to get into production environment first, but that there are opportunities. You just have to know where to look for them. So I think that's a really good point. Moving on to our next section, I just have to know, what kind of tea have you brought us, Juan Carlos? And please spill.
Yes. Well, I think I'm going to talk about a very personal experience of how actually I got into geoscience. I don't want to talk about anyone else, maybe in another show.
Okay.
So when I was a kid, I actually, since kindergarten, I was in theater. I was kind of an actor since I was in kindergarten. I joined very early in my life a theater company in Colombia, where I was born. And I was an artist throughout my primary school and high school. So I thought, as a young kid, I had my life defined. I'm going to be an artist. So I used to write also theater in this theater company. I used to practice, writing scripts and putting them to performance and all of that. So when I finished high school, I decided, can I make a sustainable life being an artist? So I decided to take 2 years after I finished high school without going to university to explore, like, where do I really fit and do something I really love and have a sustainable life. So I joined a different theater company at the time. There was a kind of a very diverse group of young professionals and students, university students, finishing their university education. So I was the kind of young kid in the group, was possibly 16 years old. And during 2 years, I had the opportunity to see and kind of prototype the life of these different professionals and students, and seeing, engineers, medical doctors, nurses, language specialists, geologists. And at the end of the 2 years, I really like what the geologists did, and I kind of find a parallel. It's like, okay, wait, I like the theater because I like the storytelling, but geologists are also storytellers with rocks. So that's my younger self. Like, I think I like this. I think I got into geology more on the storytelling side. I kind of got fascinated as a kid with these young professionals telling stories with a rock in their hand, and it's like, oh, this is something I find a lot of similarities with arts. And I postulated to university to geosciences, and that's how I started this journey.
Oh my God, I love this.
It wasn't the typical go camping or, it's just completely unrelated. Yeah.
Completely unrelated. But I mean, in fairness, I guess I always wanted to be a historian because I loved history. And my parents told me that, you can't go to school to study history unless you want to be a teacher. And I was like, ooh, I don't know if I want to be a teacher. So they're like, well, you can't just study history. There's no future in it, say. And I was like, oh, well, hey, geology, science, history.
You became an earth historian now.
Exactly. Oh my God, I love it. That's a really good one. Thank you. All right, guys, moving on now. I guess I found that what I think is pretty easy is that when I have people on the show, I request for them to send me a paper so that we can ground our discussion in a paper. Very few people so far have followed that advice. Juan Carlos is no different. He has chosen his own PDAC short course. For everyone listening, the course outline is as follows. Fundamentals that include QA/QC, so important. A review of methodologies, interpretation of 4-acid ICP data, geomet, ore body knowledge, regional soil geochem, applications of till and indicator minerals, and glaciated geochem. I've seen the outline. I've read the first chapter. I've even read his chapter. It's an incredible course. Next time that they're giving it, I'm going to be there. If you want to hang out with me and learn some stuff, let's all go. However, since this is not publicly available, Juan Carlos, can you briefly outline the purpose of the course and why you think it's important to talk about all these things?
Yes, sure. I have to give credit to Linda Bloom from Analytical Solutions. So this is a workshop that Linda Bloom and myself have put together at the PDAC. And it came from the same idea that I was mentioning earlier, that there has been an extreme focus on geochemistry from an exploration perspective. And there is nothing wrong. But if you consider geochemical applications as a composition, then exploration is just one part of the composition. And then there is these other parts that have been, in my opinion, neglected from kind of an educational perspective, and is how geochemistry fits in the not just the exploration, but in the mining and solving problems in mining the ore bodies that we mine for a profit. So the idea of the workshop is to kind of gather a group of topics and invite experts in different fields that cover all aspects from the very fundamentals, exploration included, but also how geochemistry fits, for example, geometallurgy, environmental geoscience, that you're going to have an environmental geoscience, geochemist in your team. That's very important part, because ultimately, when we focus on ore body, we didn't name the workshop on geochemistry for mineral deposits. We mentioned it ore body knowledge, because an ore body is something that we mine for a profit. This is a business. So we are focusing on the value creation here, and not every mineral deposit it can be mined for a profit. But ideally, an ore body, if it's properly evaluated, actually is going to produce a profit for shareholders and stakeholders. So we are focused on actually bringing these geochemical applications so to solve problems and identifying economic opportunities and also risk of value destruction through the mining business cycle using multi-element geochemistry, just because we want to model or support, for instance, resource estimation. If you are one of the important things in characterizing an ore body is really knowing how much payable metal is there, and a lot of the geostatistical methods depend heavily on domaining, so that the estimators are constrained to a domain where you have certain conditions for that estimator to be correct, like stationarity. You have in the same single population, and geochemistry can really help shed insight into how to domain a mineral deposit, so that the process of mineral resource estimation is more efficient and is less prone to underestimation or overestimation, for instance. But another important thing, in the ore body knowledge is, the metallurgical flow sheet, and is how I use geochemistry to constrain, for example, cyanide consumption, to identify these domains that are going to be super expensive in terms of consuming cyanide. How can I identify why this particular part of the ore body is giving me less recoveries in the flotation or in a cyanide leach? How can I use geochemistry to actually understand from that geological perspective, but also to model it in 3D? Environmental domaining is the same. When you're modeling an ore body, the waste rocks are important, because you still have to manage them. There might be acid rock generation. There may be metals that leach into the environment. You need to characterize that. They are part of your ore body. They are not adding dollars. They are removing dollars from your pocket, because you still have to manage this environmental quality and prove that you can mine your ore body efficiently. So these and many other applications are part of modeling, the value creation, inputs and outputs of money into your mining operation, and geochemistry is a central role of this. So this is pretty much the focus of the workshop that Linda and myself put at the PDAC, is kind of bringing a little bit more of understanding that your geochemical data sets are not the exclusive monopoly of the exploration group, that they serve to many more purposes in the mining industry. in an operation, and that brings a responsibility, and is that these data sets need to be managed by qualified professionals, which in my view is still not standard in the industry.
Yeah, I think you brought up a huge point there, how well some people and some organizations are doing of managing their data, but still how much further that other organizations need to go towards making sure that their data is able to be multi-client. Great point.
Yes.
And so that kind of leads into my first question here, which is that a term that repeatedly comes up in this workshop is that geochemical data is multi-client. In other words, it can be applied to more than just exploration. And again, we've talked about this a bit, but I just really want to get it into, especially our younger listeners' minds, about this concept of ore body knowledge and why it's important, especially for companies, to recognize the role of geochemistry in programs larger than just exploration.
Yes, I insist always in my talks or workshops that geochemistry is multi-client, and that means is that that kind of brings an important challenge, and it's not many companies have professional geochemists managing their data sets. So this is the problem. If you don't, from day one, from your exploration to mine closure, we are collecting geochemical data. If you don't ensure that the data collection is multi-client from day one, then the problem is, as you know, you go from discovery to start planning a pre-feasibility study, etc. Then these data sets are not going to speak with these other processes that you're trying to model. Maybe the wrong digestion was used. Maybe the detection limits are not there. Just to give you an example, if you put, for example, the responsibility of collecting the geochemical data in the exploration budget, or maybe in the resource model budget, maybe people are not gonna sample waste rocks, or just sample the main part of the mineralized interval and some shoulder. The problem with this is later, when other client, which is the environmental group, wants to understand what are the environmental risks in the waste rocks, they have not been measured, because it was never, the geochemistry was never collected multi-client. It was meant to see the payable metal. It wasn't meant to see the metals that have a negative value. It means doesn't bring money to your pocket. It actually remove money from your pockets. So maybe the choice of the geochemical package is good for the exploration group, but those trace elements that are important, for example, for environmental geoscientists like mercury, were not appropriate. So even you measure mercury, it wasn't detected, but those trace amount of mercury can harm the environment, for instance. And there are many situations, and this goes the same as you know, as a project progresses. Even geochemistry is being collected by metallurgists. Like in every metallurgical test work, there is some form of geochemistry. But these geochemical data sets collected by the metallurgical department, for instance, sometimes they don't speak with the same quality, with the same characteristics to the more larger scale exploration data set in the drill hole data. So you can never relate one to the other. So unless geochemistry is managed from a multi-client perspective and is seen as a data set that is going to service the mining operation from exploration to mine closure, then we're going to have these issues, and it's never going to end. And geochemistry is never going to be recognized in a company as actually a valuable asset. It's just an expense if we don't manage to collect geochemistry by qualified professionals that are not thinking just, oh, this is for the exploration. This is for the mining business from exploration to closure. If we don't think that way, then we're going to be collecting geochemistry as business as usual, fragmented data sets that barely speak to each other, and a lot of money that is wasted when you could have one of the best quality data sets to model any problem in your mining operation, even thinking when closing an operation.
Yeah, I'm thinking onto some of the projects I'm currently working on, and just seeing how I've had some light conversations with them about this. It's not why I was brought into some of these projects, but just how impactful those words are for people to start really kind of changing their minds. And I think that, if anything, this could be maybe an excerpt that I just publish with the footnote of the episode description.
Yes,
it's such a good point.
Yeah, the multi-client aspect, and I would say in my professional career, I would be able to count with one hand, with the fingers of one hand, the number of companies that actually have professional people managing their data sets. And until this is recognized as a valuable asset, then geochemistry cannot be applied to its full potential. So on one side is the way companies are structured. They are not, sometimes the budgets belongs to groups, and each group make their own decisions based on their views. So until this becomes somehow more accepted that it's an asset that is multi-client, we're gonna keep seeing issues like we just mentioned.
Something that I'm thinking about is that when I was working in the hyperspectral industry, one of the companies that we worked for, in order to get it accepted broadly throughout their organization, it's set up in more of a director's fund. So everybody that should be using it and everybody that was using it would get the money from there. And that way it did become a multi-client data set, because there was no ownership by exploration or by metallurgy or by environmental. It just, because it came from that director's budget, it was for everybody. So maybe that's something that people can think about as well as we rethink this.
And unless that happen, as long as budgets are discretionary from particular groups, this is not gonna work. I have spent enough time in the mining industry to say that unless the budgets are general, it's not gonna work, because there is a kind of a conflict of time. Maybe the group that is managing the budget this year has a very short time objective in their goals, and they might not see and don't want to see the value of investing in a better quality geochemistry, because that's not what is needed for permitting. So once you spend all those millions of dollars in geochemistry, and another group comes to use those assays or those multi-element geochemical data sets, they may want to see some things that were not captured in the data set, and either you have to redo the program, or simply just doing an educated guess of what the quality of whatever property you are measuring. So unless these budgets are coming from a common pool, as long as it belongs to individual groups, I think the priority of the group is going to rule over the actual larger concept.
And another thing that I've heard said is that a reason why people don't want to sample a whole drill hole, let's say that their deposit's quite deep and on top of it is just overburden. The reason they don't want to sample the whole thing is just because the lab's are already so backed up that even if they wanted to sample the overburden, they won't, because first of all, it doesn't matter. And then second of all, it's just going to take so much time out of them getting their actual results back because the labs are so backed up.
I have a couple of examples. I think the lab is a real excuse that doesn't really fit in my mind. But I can give you a couple of examples of opportunity lost of not sampling top to bottom. I always recommend sampling top to bottom. One is, for example, even the overburden, like having issues, geotech engineering, having issues. Then maybe, and these are, I cannot name the operations, but these are real problems. So, for example, slow stability due to quaternary cover. And maybe this important contact in the quaternary kind of unconsolidated sediments is very important, and that contact can be picked with geochemistry. And you could easily have a geotechnical map with your geochemical data sets, but that implies that you measure the geochemical attributes of the cover. Another example is years later, after mining, people realize that the sedimentary cover is just an alluvium of the deposit being eroded, and there is significant gold values, and then you didn't measure it. So I think, and in the waste part is also the environmental quality. Maybe you didn't measure that arsenic, that mercury. You know, you focus so much in the part of the ore body, but this metalliferous dispersion trend that is giving you waste rock very rich in mercury. For the exploration geologists, it's awesome to have these mercury silver plumes because it gives you more detection of where to drill. But once you start mining, this is an issue. And you didn't measure it because you only care of the mineralized part, right? So I think I understand companies not putting their dollars in the waste rock, and that kind of goes back to what I was saying in a minute, and is that it's a conflict of time horizons and what definition of success is. Our definition of success sometimes is very short time. Definition of success is just for this group. Success for this group means showing that there is 10 grams per ton, is not really providing a company with a set that can make this company data driven and solve every possible problem that they have throughout the mining operation. That's not how we think. So I think it's more of a cultural thing that needs to be changed, because I don't see in today's world why not collecting the multi-element geochem top to bottom.
We've talked about this in the introduction as well, but a related concept that's really interesting is that of the monetary value that geochemistry brings in terms of identifying both that positive and the negative dollar of an ore deposit. And something that we didn't quite touch on, but could you just talk about what this means in terms of, say, elements and mineralogy?
Yes. So when kind of in the line of work I do, I always like to frame geochemical modeling in terms of identifying value drivers. And value drivers are positive, are geological domains or geochemical domains that bring money in your pockets, put money in your pockets, or these geological domains that actually remove money out of your bank account. So as I was mentioning earlier, this is a combination of geological processes, but also an engineered product. For instance, geologists are very familiar with weathering and oxidation. So this is a geological attribute that you can model easily with your geochemical data sets, and map intensities of alteration, intensities of weathering in this example, intensities of oxidation. So is it oxidation and weathering? What kind of value driver is in your mining operation? It depends on what kind of flow sheet, what kind of metallurgical processing you are doing. If you're doing, for example, flotation, that oxidation, that weathering may introduce clays, may introduce iron oxides, that may change the viscosity of your flotation tanks, and you may kill a good percentage of your recovery due to weathering and oxidation. If you're doing a heap leach, for example, weathering and oxidation may be a blessing because it is oxidizing minerals that, in the case of, for example, gold, locked gold, then it's exposing more surfaces of gold, and then you're going to increase your recovery. So this is neither good or bad. It depends on geological process and combination of engineering. And the same goes for lithology, the same goes for alterations, the same goes for the stratigraphy. All of these geological attributes can be modeled geochemically, but when you model those geochemically, you have to think on what kind of the value chain you are feeding. For instance, sometimes geologists get really lost in detail. Is it really important if you are modeling, for example, an operation, and the real question you have is, I'm having throughput issues. Is it really important to name these 30 different litho codes? Or maybe you have to focus your analysis on a lithological and engineering perspective of where you have this break in hardness, for example. Maybe these 2 or 3 different lithologies, not these 20, 30 different litho codes. So that's what I mean when I talk about the value creation and the risks of value destruction, is that these are geological models or geological attributes that can be modeled easy in geochemistry and can fit into your assessment of risks when you start identifying these lithologies that are more favorable for recovery or more problematic to cyanide consumption. That's the point. Modeling with a question that in the mining industry is beyond the geological history of your ore body. It has to incorporate these processes that either put or remove value to your mining operation.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. And now kind of pivoting towards your contribution to this workshop, which if anybody gets to see it or has sat through it, it's really fascinating. There's a lot of math involved, which can be scary, but it's also really, really fascinating. Your contribution was entitled A Review of Methodologies for Geochemical Data Analysis, and you broke the presentation down to 4 sections. You had compositional data, geochem templates, unsupervised learning, and supervised learning. And so while we're going to apologize profusely to our listeners that we're not going to get the full lecture of the course here, I think more interesting is the reasoning behind each of these sections, and particularly the first two. As geochemists are aware, geochemistry is compositional data. And for those listeners that aren't familiar with this concept, can you just summarize this quickly and explain why it's important to understand this?
Yes, I think when you are doing any sort of mathematical analysis, I think the analogy I put is like, imagine you are an architect and you have this piece of land where you want to build a nice building. You have to use appropriate measuring tools that allow you to measure, this area so that when you actually execute your project, things are gonna fit or fall in the right place. It's the same when you're doing mathematical modeling. We use measuring tools, and the measuring tools that we use need to be appropriate for the data sets that we use. So as you mentioned, geochemistry is a special type of data, which is called compositional. And what that means is geochemistry cannot be negative. Like in the real number space, numbers can be positive, negative, and they are free to range from minus infinite to plus infinite. But geochemistry cannot be negative. It's always positive. It's close to a constant. If you're working in percentages and your lab results sum or add up to more than 100%, there is something wrong. If you are working in parts per billion and your assays add more than 1 billion, then there is something wrong. You cannot exceed those boundaries. So it's a closed space, and all of this and many other properties basically results in that when you are going to analyze geochemical data, you have to use special measuring tools. And the important information carried by geochemical data is in their ratios, for example. So there have been a lot of mathematical models and tools developing since the 80s that kind of part of the compositional data analysis theory that you can apply to your geochemical data to open up to an actual real space where your geochemistry is not close or is not affected by disclosure problems, and you can actually have a real measurements. I think one of the examples I give from a more practical point of view is cluster analysis. When we do cluster analysis, is because we want to measure distances between geochemical data points in geochemical space. These distances, depending on the geochemical space that you create, reflect geological processes. But if you use a tool that measures the distance between 2 points wrong, then you are gonna get wrong the geological process that separated, for example, a sample from alteration 1 to alteration B, from fresh to altered, it moves in geochemical space because silicification or argillic alteration. These distances imply this process. If you don't use the appropriate mathematical tools, you are not going to be able to see these processes. So I think in some of the work I've published and the workshops I insist a lot on the data pre-processing, which in addition to the quality control means hopefully you do some special treatment to your data to deal with the closure problems. And there's a few simple tools like, for example, a central log range transformation that you can use to kind of be able to measure distances with confidence. So yeah, in a nutshell, is framing your mathematical analysis with the right measuring tools.
Yeah, perfect. Because ultimately, everything that we're going to be doing with this data is mathsy. So understanding this concept is pretty important. And then the second topic that you tackle are geochemical templates. We discussed this at length with Pim in our 5th episode here in Geochemistry, but I think it's important also to get another take on this and an explanation as to why these templates should be used with caution. And I think this is also a good moment to put in a plug why we shouldn't be assaying drill core necessarily with aqua regia.
Yes. So two questions. So one is the template part. I myself have published a couple of templates that are now in a commercial software, and I'm not against using the templates, but people need to understand the limitations. Templates are generalizations. It is like having a generalization of what a human being is. It allows us to compare one human with other, but each of us are so different. And the same goes for the ore bodies that we explore and we mine for. Every ore body is different. Even two twin ore bodies in the same mineral system, they are completely different. So templates are just generalizations that allow you to do a quick EDA, exploratory data analysis, and understand, oh, maybe I have a bunch of rhyolites, or maybe the rocks here are mafic, maybe the alteration is this, but it doesn't, because templates are generalizations. They don't capture the wealth of information hidden in this multivariate structure that your geochemical data sets live in. So in order to actually be able to extract all this information that makes your mineral deposit unique, you have to do a more custom-made template or a custom-made analysis using multivariate statistics and all these mathematical modeling tools that today we have at our fingertips, with open source software, provided that you put the geochemistry in the right mathematical space. So it's very often seen people just taking the geochem, putting into a template without thinking, what was the digestion that this template was made for? So you throw an aqua regia digestion into a template to discriminate volcanic rocks made for 4 acids, and believe me, I've seen that. Or or you put your aqua regia digestion into a template to discriminate hydrothermal alteration, like on the kind of potassic, sericitic, sodic, when you are dealing with a partial digestion. So it can really change your story. So use your templates, but understand that they have limitations. Understand what were they designed for, and also, even if you have all the perfect data set to use in your template, you have to understand that they are not going to tell the full story of your data set. You have to dive a little bit deeper into multivariate analysis of your data sets to really extract the information hidden in your ore body in those geochemical data sets.
Just thinking too, the last focus of your course, it's on the machine learning aspect, which I think everybody's just really excited about. Everybody's always very excited about machine learning. You also you dive both into supervised and unsupervised learning. And some of the best points you make in here is why it's important to be a geochemist when working with geochemical data sets. And this is something that we explored a lot when we chatted with Mike Whitbread. And I was just wondering if you could just comment on that. What do you think the combination is? Do you think that you have to be a geochemist to do this data science? Do you think that you could have a data scientist and a geochemist working together? Do geochemists need to be also data scientists? What do you think is this equation that we're looking for going forward?
I think there is no geochemical, there is no real geochemical analysis or model without real geochemical analysis, is in my opinion. I think the trend I'm seeing is in the past 20 years, there's been an explosion of democratization of the machine learning and data analytics tools through open source software. So it is very easy to learn Python or R and just plug your geochemical data into a machine learning model. Now it's not a challenge. These data analytics have been democratized. Neural networks have been democratized as well. So you have all these tools at your fingertips to use with your geochemical data sets. But what is really at the core of any science is not even just geochemistry. It's the domain knowledge, and domain knowledge cannot be replaced. If you just open your machine learning algorithm and fits your geochemical data, you are going to have a model for sure. But I always encourage to start modeling with a question, like what is really what you want to model, and having an answer like, for example, I want to model alteration. No, but the question is why you want to model alteration. Is because you are doing exploration, or you are modeling alteration because there is a problem in the mill or in the flotation tanks? Why are you modeling alteration? And then once you have that fundamental question, you have to understand geochemistry, how these elements may map an alteration system to do what I commonly refer to as engineering geochemical space. So once I understand a fundamental question, I'm modeling alteration because I want to solve A or B problem. Then you set a geochemical space where anyone can run a machine learning model and is gonna get a very good answer. It's gonna get a combination of clusters or domains that is gonna be directly related to the problem that you are trying to solve. But trying to approach the geochemical modeling simply from I can run principal component, a TSNE, I can run the fanciest, clustering algorithm out in the market. I'm gonna feed all of that, and then I'm gonna map that in 3D. There is no purpose on that. There is not even geochemical analysis fed into that kind of algorithmic model. So and I could give a number of examples. My advice is always do your geochemical analysis as you would do any geochemical analysis, and then plug in your machine learning modeling to extract that insight. I see, for example, I've seen examples where people just throw more elements to a model to map stratigraphy, for example. In very well known, I present one of those examples in the workshop where you have kind of a very stratigraphy dipping at 45 degrees. Then you throw every quotation mark immobile element into an algorithm to map stratigraphy. But you didn't do trace element mobility analysis because you assume everything is immobile. In the papers, everything is immobile, but everything can be moved with the right conditions. And then just adding, for example, yttrium, it completely changes a kind of an stratigraphy that dips to an angle to a very flat stratigraphy. So these are the kind of things of geological literacy, understanding how the elements behave, doing all the geochemical analysis before you plug that into an algorithm. That's very important. And that's basically, I frame it from this point of view is you have to let geochemical analysis or geochemical literacy guide your algorithmic modeling, not the opposite.
And I think on the counterpoint to that too, and why if we're going to be using algorithms such as these, is that you have to understand the fundamentals of the algorithm such that, for example, if you have, say, two immobile elements, but they actually are one-to-one, then you shouldn't be using them you should pick one. You shouldn't be using both of them because that's just causing complications in your algorithm. So I think it goes both ways where we can't, yes, we understand the background because, we're geochemists and we've asked that right question, which I think is a really great point of yours, but we also need to be understanding the algorithms that we're using. So now just because there's so much out there and so much available, especially when things are published in Geochemist's favorite software, IOGAS, now that there's TSNE in there, now that there are, DBScan and stuff, like we have to understand fundamentally what these are in order to use them properly and not just because the platform has made it easy for people to use.
Yes, I agree with that. And that kind of goes back to the other point. Like now that you bring all of these solid fundamental geochemical reasoning into your analysis, you cannot get away on just using a mathematical model without knowing at least how it works. It's just exactly to the point I was mentioning about compositional data. I've seen a lot of papers talking about these clustering algorithms and why some are much better than others. And I have myself done a lot of tests, and I can say this with confidence. If you set the right geochemical space, if you set the appropriate elements to solve the question you want to solve, almost every algorithm will give you a very good result, from the more questionable to the more sophisticated. But the more sophisticated algorithm, even if you understand what the algorithm is doing and you don't set the right space, it's not going to give you an appropriate answer. So yeah, it's kind of a balance in today's world. And this is something I commonly insist, is that geoscience is a relatively young science. When we compare with the astronomy, mathematics, chemistry, we became a kind of a formal science maybe 200, 250 years ago. And as our discipline evolves as a formal science, our discipline is becoming more and increasingly more mathematized. So we cannot, we're at that stage where we cannot escape having mathematical literacy to model geological systems. As an astronomer, cannot escape being good in mathematics. That's the way it is. And as science is mature, the mathematization and computerization of the sciences evolve, and so it has the professional practicing that science. I think that is what is happening, and we are at that stage where a little bit more of mathematical literacy is needed in schools so that people learn to use the right tool for the right analysis.
Yeah, I would almost argue though, I had such a horrific time at school. I said this too, and I think me and Mike Whitbread talked about this. I had to take 4 calculuses or something like that, and it has not sunk in. And I think I was just so focused on passing it that I lost a lot of what I maybe was supposed to be learning. So I'm not saying that geology needs a dumbed down math, but maybe helping us along there with all of us that aren't so inclined to do so many calculuses, say, or linear algebras and stuff, to try and kind of tie it into a loop, do some machine learning courses for the geology sciences and go through us what the different algorithms mean and everything, but don't just kind of scare us off of it by just...
I think the problem with the education is the problem with the education system, because I think it's the same. The experience that you are mentioning is the same for almost every person being educated in a university. even in disciplines where you have mathematics as important part, and is that mathematics is not taught from a practical point of view. So basically people lose their knowledge. Like, for example, you go and learn all these linear algebra, calculus, or even programming courses when you're doing your bachelor degree. But the problem with that is that there is no context. So you are seeing why you solve a differential equation, why this vector space is important. You don't know why. So you have to lose that knowledge. you have to lose that if that has no practical application. So I think it's a challenge in the education system, but as our professions become more and more mathematized, we will not be able to escape at least increasing our math literacy as geologists.
Yeah, don't disagree, because look, even me, not great at math, but diving into a lot of these different algorithms and stuff, the amount of time that I spent on the phone with some of my my more mathsy friends to describe this stuff to me, and them sending me to different websites to get different explanations of stuff. People put some really good stuff out there. Everybody, you can make it through, but it is important to understand fundamentally what these things are doing, because that's really keen towards applying them. One of the last things I want to ask you then is, I found that for me, the second take-home point from your machine learning section was that respecting geologic space when concluding that your models make sense. And we did just touch on this a bit. And I think it's just, what really hit me was, just because a model that you get back says that it's 90% accurate. So let's just say that you did some supervised learning, it comes back and it says that, okay, your model is 90% accurate. It doesn't mean, though, necessarily that this model is going to work for you with your geologic problem. So can you just expand a bit more on this and comment between the difference between a machine learning model and a geologic model, and how there needs to be some synergy between the two to conclude that your machine learning model actually does work?
Yes. So in the validation workflow that I always put, there is one additional step. Just, every machine learning model or any mathematical model has a metrical model performance, right? You can, for example, do cluster analysis, whatever the clustering algorithm you want to use, and there's plenty silhouette plots and all these different metrics that you can assess the quality of the clusters. The clusters are well separated. If you're doing supervised learning, you can get 95% accuracy, measure the accuracy, 80%, 70%, 99% accuracy. So that means I'm building a predictive model that is 99% or 95% accurate when I'm creating this model. Or you can even go to assess the quality of different classes. If you are doing a classification system, I'm predicting this alteration or this lithology better than this one, but everything seems perfect. But ultimately, I think the ultimate checkbox is the geological space, because it doesn't matter when you have these metrics of model performance. It doesn't matter if, and I've seen actually in examples where, for example, the clustering metrics are perfect. You get reason to suggest that these 3 or 4 clusters are supported by the metrics you are using to measure this cluster quality, for example. You plot that in the geological space, they make no sense. If you are mapping a stratigraphy and stratigraphy is being cross-cut by your domains, then it makes no sense. You can have, for example, I've seen actually published. I have seen publications where even with the now computer vision here, you get run your core photography through a machine learning algorithm and extract pictures that you can increment your data set with your geochemistry. So practically you are informing geochemistry with your photos. And I think, for example, examples where people arguing that the core photo is much better at predicting, for example, abundant iron formation than the geochem. You just need to look at iron. You just need to look at iron, and you get a much better model. So where I'm going is these metrics of model performance are biased towards the geochemical space, towards the space that you build. If you start with a wrong classification and you get 90% accuracy in a supervised model, you're gonna get 99% accuracy. You are 99% certain that wrong geological model that you started with is wrong. But unless you really put boots on the ground and really constrain that the geological model is consistent with the geological space, then I think if your geochemical models doesn't really honor the geological attributes of your ore bodies, then I think you need to change the approach, and usually is kind of changing the geochemical space that you are using. So for a specific question, so just focusing on I get 90%, 99% prediction accuracy, or these clusters are very good separation, good quality, is not enough. You have to put that to the test, to the real geology. And there are things that you can use, like for example, looking at, for example, the structural geology, making sure that you understand either with oriented core or in the field what the actual direction or trend of your stratigraphy. That kind of field geology is still very relevant in today's world. So yeah, I've seen a lot of projects where the metrics of model performance look really excellent, but the geological results are indeed nonsensical.
Yeah, that's a really great point. That whole garbage in, garbage out kind of thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's all about that. So it goes back to your point of, so what do we want? We want geochemists that work with data scientists, or we want geochemists that are data scientists. There is no single question, but I can say that, back in the early 2000s, I think back in 2010, there was an interesting article in, I think it was the New York Times, I don't recall, and it says data scientist is the coolest job of the 21st century, the best job of the 21st century. So when this was very popularized, data science was popularized by technology companies like Facebook, Google's. Then there was a big amount of people being driven towards data science, and a lot of companies opening positions for data scientists. I think, and there is a lot written in regular newspapers about the mistakes done by these companies, and is that at one point everyone thought that artificial intelligence was going to suppress, going to offer the solution to the problems in a particular industry, and then you're bringing data scientists to solve all these issues. And then what companies really found very quickly is that the domain knowledge was very important. So I think the last the adoption, I think after 2010 or something like that, companies started to focus a lot on making sure that some of their domain knowledge experts have some education in data science as well, because it adds actually more value than just being purely a data science trying to solve problems of an industry that you don't understand. I think in the mining industry, we are always late adopters. So I guess we're going to be doing the same mistake, building entire departments of data scientists in companies that still don't have a geophysicist or a geochemist. So yeah. I think we are going to go in the same direction.
I think we're already there. I've seen yeah. some of these. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that kind of speaks, we are late adopters. If I said early adopters, I was wrong. We are late adopters in many aspects, and sometimes we come late and adopt the same mistakes. So there is no real answer to that, because it's also a personal question. You as a professional, how you want to develop yourself. You want to be a well-rounded geoscientist who understands geology in the field, who understands geochemistry, who understands mathematics, or even you as a manager, what do you want to build? You want to build a team that is a team of data geoscientists as a team, meaning that you have all the skills together. It is an open question, but whatever the path you take, either do it as a personal level or as a teams, you have to honor the domain knowledge, because without domain knowledge, these AI systems are not going to produce the best results.
I know from all the statistics that I have on the podcast of who actually is listening, and I know that we have a nice range from the 18 to 23 crowd all the way through the the mid 60s, and I think that that's a point that's really pertinent for both people that are still growing as young geoscientists, but then also we're always growing within our fields and everything, but it's also really pertinent for people that are maybe not towards the end of their career, but at least, mid-career and everything to be thinking about in terms of how they want to develop their teams, develop themselves, because data science, I think, is really important. But at the same time, we have to be using it in a way that makes sense and it works for our projects. And I think that you made some really great points there.
And if you go, for example, today, it's very easy to get a Coursera or open a MOOC on data science, right? If you are if you are interested enough, you can learn with the open source content, videos. Universities, very famous university, releasing their data science programs for free. Some others charge us very small dollar value. But how many workshops are there of real applied geochemistry for ore body knowledge and geochemistry that can make a full semester? Yeah. There's not even one. So I think geochemistry, as is needed in the mining industry, is not really being taught at universities. And data science is being taught at universities now, but still the geochemistry don't get the traction. And then the question is, what kind of models are you going to produce without the domain knowledge? That's kind of an open question. Would you entrust the value assessment of your ore body to well-educated data scientists who don't have the domain knowledge? That's the question. And I'm not talking at an individual level. It also works as a group. Mm-hmm. That's a very important question. Still, geochemistry is still geochemistry. If you look at how many years it's been in the industry, maybe since the 60s, as exploration geochemistry, still there is not a real applied.
We should rename this episode Hard Truths with Juan Carlos.
but you can get thousands of data scientists.
Yeah. No, it's a really good point. And look, it's not in my 10, 15 year plan, but it's It's such a good point, and I'm also always on the hunt too for, and this, if we have any listeners from universities here, thinking about you guys, MDRU codes, whoever's listening out there, mines and stuff. If you guys ever want to put on some geochemistry short courses or anything like this, I'm always out there looking for things to do for myself. Do any kind of like geomet courses, do any kind of geochem courses like this. There's so much to be said too about continuing education and the lack of this as part of a continuing education. The least we can do is this course that, Juan Carlos and Linda Bloom have put together, and that's, what was it, a 2-day course?
It was a 1 day, yeah.
A 1-day
1 day,
course.
yeah.
Yeah. So I mean,
that's not enough.
We can do better, industry. So
absolutely.
Think about this.
And
you have a lot of professionals.
And just going back to the storytelling, theater, historian thing, there's been a lot of content generated in universities with geochemistry that focuses on the Earth historian part. We need more geochemistry also as part of this, business of the mining industry, because there's plenty of papers written about, even in mineral deposits that don't become ore bodies. There's plenty of papers, and that's good, but the Earth history is one part. I think we need to start telling stories of the mill, the flotation cell, the heap leach. That's the part that I think is missing.
I love that. Is Julie Hunt out there? She listening? Karen Hole. All right, so amazing. To round out all this, I guess the last question is, what does the next workshop look like? Who should be attending this workshop? And when do you think you guys are going to put it on?
PDAC has released the videos, and I think I'm just going to put them in YouTube, so I'll let you know. So you inform your audience. I'm not sure when to do it again. It takes a lot of, we are not paid as mining professionals to do this. This is kind of our collaboration to the industry, fostering an environment where, in this particular case, applied geochemistry is raising the awareness, of this. But definitely, I'll be interested in developing more of this content and bring other professionals. This is not a workshop that I teach only myself. I'm just one part of it. Linda Bloom and myself organizing it. We normally invite people with different geochemical flavors. Maybe we'll continue developing and bringing this workshop so that we spread the idea of using geochemistry for the mining industry or body knowledge.
That's amazing. Well, we're looking forward to that. And when you do have that release, I'll be sure to put it up on the website for everybody to have a link to check it out. So that said, I want to thank everybody for listening to Geochemistry, and a big thanks to Juan Carlos for stopping by the show, dishing some tea. I don't think I'll be able to get that out of my mind for a while. Juan Carlos, the artist. And taking us really on this ore body knowledge expedition. Thanks to our sponsor, LKI Consulting, and to It's Water and Coma Media for our music. And I'm looking forward to chatting with y'all next month.
Thank you, Sam.